always necessarily what you learn and what you know, but it's who you know. And they literally taught me which judges liked red shoes and high heels. Judge looks at me and he's like, "Are you kidding me?" I said, "I wish I was."
Welcome to Celebrating Justice, presented by the Trial Lawyers Journal and Cloudlex, the next-gen legal cloud platform built exclusively for personal injury law. Get inspired by the nation's top trial lawyers and share in the stories that shape our pursuit of justice. Follow the podcast and join our community at triallawyersjournal.com. Now here's your host, editor of TLJ and VP of Marketing at Cloudlex, Chad Sands.
Welcome back, friends, to Celebrating Justice. In this episode, we hear stories from trial lawyer Cynthia Attard. At first, Cynthia thought she was going to change the world with numbers as a corporate tax attorney, but quickly realized that wasn't for her. After a stint as a police officer for about 5 years, she then went back to a life of law, but this time as a personal injury attorney. Cynthia shares stories from the defense side involving a case with a daughter and father suing a mother, one of the more interesting stories from her days as a police officer, and one of the more unique plaintiff cases she had to take on due to a botched pedicure. But first, I asked her, why did you want to become a trial lawyer?
When I got out of law school, I thought I was going to be a great corporate attorney, and I went into tax law. Thought I was going to change the world with numbers, and couldn't be farther from the truth. It was dry. It was one of those things that, you never felt like you were doing anything different. Each day was the same. Yes, you might have saved your client, your corporate client, money that day, but it's not the same. I went through bankruptcy as well. I've been an attorney over 20 years now. And I delved. I started there. If you want to talk about what I was like before that, I used to be a police officer, and I was in Nassau County. So that was definitely a very open experience as to the way justice gets handled on the street. So I said to myself, all right, well, you know what? Being a mom of 4 kids, I said that's not exactly the way I wanted to continue on with my career. So I went to being a lawyer. Now, I started off with my first personal injury firm in Queens, and they literally taught me which judges liked red shoes and high heels or skirts or the whole 9 yards. And I learned every possible dark side to personal injury law that you can imagine. But you know what? It teaches you, or it taught me, that it's not always necessarily what you learn and what you know, but it's who you know. I met a lot of judges and a lot of clerks, and we're all people. There was one judge that had said something to me that really struck a chord. One of the functions, and he explained, he goes, you could always tell a new trial attorney when they walk in the door. And you can see them, they're trying to pretend they're not sweating and they're shaking like a leaf. And my suggestion to them is, it doesn't matter, because after you've done it once, then you're an expert. And that's it. It stuck with me. That stuck with me because I met him obviously early in my career, but every single time I had done something that was different or a little bit off the cuff from what I was used to, I thought of exactly that day and what he said to me. And I said, you know what? You're right.
But you had a career as a police officer and then you decided to go to law school?
I was a lawyer before I was a police officer. And that's when I was doing the corporate law. Okay. And when I had my 4 children, I wanted to be home for my children. There's not too many law offices that are open 24 hours, obviously, by the way.
Right.
So the police department was knocking on my door, and I said, you know what? I think I'm going to go for it. And I was a police officer for about 5 years. And it was a great time because, I was able to work nights and I was there for my children while I was raising them. It was a really big switch. So I was already an attorney when I became a police officer. But when I came back, I didn't go back to the corporate world. I went to trials.
And so you were a corporate attorney, left to become a police officer for 5 years, and then came back to a life of law, but went into personal injury. So does your background as a police officer make you unique compared to your peers?
Oh, absolutely. Listen, number one, in personal injury alone, It's predominantly based on police reports.
Uh-huh.
I know what the procedure is. I know what the criminal procedure is. I know what, the police officers have to, the rules they have to abide by, as well as the fire department, and so forth. I could relate to the officers when it comes to deposing them, whether they're a client or they're a defendant. One of my most recent depositions was regarding a firefighter, and we were talking about negligence and so forth. And he was a little surprised about me knowing about the administrative guidelines that they are supposed to follow. And that's only stuff that you learn while you're on the street. Guess you can learn everything through the books, but why would you read it? You're not going to go through all of that to learn the full procedure. So yeah, it definitely it's given me an edge. I'd like to think that my personality has always been open before I became a police officer, but I was just able to transplant whatever aggression and conviction I had as a police officer and easily put that into a courtroom. Don't get me wrong, I'll always miss my police days. They were fun. It was like playing cops and robbers. As a girl, you don't get to play cops and robbers. The boys are like, no, you can't play cops and robbers. You're a girl. So I got to play it. I got to play it for a good 5 years. It's something that I could happily say I've done in my past.
Yes, for sure. I know it's difficult to choose one, but do you have a case, a personal injury case? I might ask you about a police case. Do you have one case that has had a big impact on you as a trial lawyer? I know it's hard to choose one, right? But
I mean, I did both plaintiff and defendant. So I have equal years of experience in both. There's one case in Queens County that I that I was defending on. I was in-house counsel to a large insurance carrier, and they had never used this expert before, never. So they decided to bestow me with this expert, one expert to defend. So it was a really odd case because the daughter was suing her mother. It was a single car accident. They were going to Hershey Park, God forbid, and the mother fell asleep behind the wheel. It was late at night and she hit a tree. Okay. So the daughter had TJI. Well, let me tell you, the mother's a lawyer, the father is a lawyer, the daughter who was suing was in law school. The only kick to that is the mother and father are both divorced.
wow.
So hence, daddy convinces the daughter to sue the mother
Uh-huh.
because he knows what the policy is. And here I am stuck in the middle of this nasty, dirty, soap opera. Okay. Where I have to explain to the court that she really wasn't injured as a result of this accident. And she's thriving and she's in law school now and so forth. The only kick to that is the one expert that I was given, he didn't have time to prep, interestingly enough. It was a really strange, odd person, which they're never going to use again, by the way. And he shows up at court, and this is after the judge had called me by my first name, by the way, and the whole jury just looked at me and looked at, so this whole, at that point when something's going wrong, there's everything happens in threes, so something's going to happen. This expert comes in and I'm asking him the questions, obviously, and saying, well, what would you do in this situation if you had a patient, giving them the hypotheticals. And he turns around and goes, well, to be honest with you, I'm not an expert in that field. I said, oh, really? I said, oh, that's wonderful. Okay. I was like, well, what do you do in these situations then? You don't treat these patients? He goes, no, I refer them to this doctor, the same doctor, mind you, that treated my client.
Oh man.
Oh, yes.
Oh
Oh,
yeah.
yes. So I sat there and I said, all right, you know what? Let's call it a day. Like I don't even know what to say anymore with this. Yeah, they got banged with that verdict. They wanted to continue with it. And I told the claims rep, I said, don't do it. Settle it now. Do what you got to do. But he was like, no, I feel that, we're going to win with this. I was like, okay. All right. And sometimes, obviously, in the defense world, you're stuck with having to follow, unfortunately, what the higher ups all always say.
Mm-hmm.
I am blessed to now have moved on to the plaintiff's world, and where I can make my own decisions and decide whether or not we're going to proceed with the case or settle it beforehand, or not going to be marching orders necessarily all the time. I think I've paid my dues enough to say, here I am, and I could actually do more of the litigating as opposed to following orders.
Yeah. So I've talked to a lot of attorneys who started on the defense side, but then they went straight to the plaintiff side. So you had the 5-year gap as the police officer. Do you have one police story you could share?
I guess one of the most interesting events I had, I guess we could start with that, is there was an individual who was angry. God forbid, and look at these things that happen, right? And he decided to take off all of his clothes and stand in the middle of the road with guns in his hand, just raised up in the air, not shooting them. And obviously nobody knows, but they weren't even loaded. But the point is, he wanted to elicit fear, so and that's exactly what he got. Outside of the shock of a completely naked individual standing in the middle of the road, and here I am with three other male officers. So it's me and the three of them. I know, obviously, you try to be in that situation. It's like no matter what, it doesn't matter what male or female. It doesn't matter who's there. We're all going to do the same job. But I'm sitting there, I was like, I'm not, and we all want to make a box around him to bring him down to the ground. Like, I'm not taking the front. I was like, I don't care how this goes, because if I take the front, this is going to be in the papers and I'm going to be on top of this naked individual.
Yeah.
So I took the back, which is okay. I took the back, but the point is, I loved being in the police department. They're a great group, and they all work really great together. And even as a female, I can say that they look out for each other. And when there's situations that do get sticky out there, they rise to the occasion. I'd like to think, at least the ones I've met. How's that sound? But you have to pay your dues with everything. Proud of it. I loved the police chases. Those were fun. Especially when you have one guy that's trying to lose you and he's going through one stop sign, two stop sign, three stop sign. I'm sitting there counting all of them. And by the time I pulled him over, I was like, all right, this is just going to be interesting. And the best is when you pull them over and then they say, do you know why I pulled you over?
Yes.
And then they give you 20 other reasons why you didn't, what you didn't see. But they just want to divulge everything. So it's fun. It was fun. It really helps you understand how people handle pressure, because it's intimidating, obviously. And you're getting pulled over and so forth. And whether you have no history or you do have a history, it's intimidating no matter how you want to play it. So it's very interesting watching people crack.
Yes. Not quite the same pressure, but there's a little bit of pressure in the courtroom, right?
Oh,
And
absolutely.
maybe now you can share one last story from the plaintiff side.
If I'm going to think back to the old plaintiff's days when I dealt with low policy cases, there's one case that for the life of me, I really didn't think it was going to go anywhere. I just didn't. It was in my first firm, and I said, you know what? I don't know where this is going. It wasn't even a motor vehicle accident, but it was personal injury. So this girl got an infection in her toe from a nail salon. And what happened was, because her gait was disturbed, it caused herniations to her back, necessitating epidurals. When I talked to the principals of the firm, I said, you really want me to present that in court? Like, is this really where you want me to go with this? Because, outside of the fact that she's about 80 pounds overweight, do you really want me to say this? Because it's going to be an interesting fight. And they said, well, what do you have to lose? I said, what do I have to lose? I'm like, my integrity, maybe? I don't know. Like, I just have to believe in the case. But obviously, when you're wet behind the ears, you've got to litigate everything, every challenge that comes your way. And let me tell you, I mean, thank God it didn't go to trial, because I wouldn't have known how to go with that one. But when we went into the conference room, to settle the case out with the judge and the defense counsel, I'm sitting there with the straight face, mind you, saying, well, oh, look at all the treatment. She underwent about 10 months of treatment as a result of her injuries, all originating from this botched pedicure. The judge looks at me and he's like, are you kidding me? I said, I wish I was. I wish I was. We have the everyday cases, but the cases that sit there and remind you, of the challenges you go through as a trial attorney and doing your best to instill your reputation and build it with the courts and other fellow attorneys and so forth. It's all a challenge all around. And then you get cases like that.
At CloudLex, we understand the challenges personal injury law firms face every day. That's why we've built the Legal Cloud platform to help you stay productive and keep your cases moving forward. CloudLex provides a comprehensive suite of applications and features to support every stage of intake, pre-litigation, trial, and more. From innovative case management to insightful analytics and HIPAA-secure client communication. CloudLex empowers your firm with the technology to thrive. Build your firm of the future and see for yourself at cloudlex.com. Now, here is this episode's closing argument.
One thing I could suggest to everyone on the plaintiff side, when you go and you pick your jury, because that's really where it counts, connect with them. During my select, I literally pull a chair up instead of standing over everybody and talking around them, and just sit down and talk to them face to face. The last thing they want is to look at an attorney and be intimidated or felt like they're being talked down to. I've seen a lot of attorneys that come in there and they just feel like they have to impose this persona of being elite. Every attorney will become elite in their own way, but you don't have to act it. It'll happen on its own. Take your time. Take your time to learn your clients. Take your time to learn the law. There's a lot of new attorneys out there that feel that they know everything, and you never know everything. It's about realizing that there's always something new that you're going to learn every day. I wouldn't be able to be as successful as I am today if it weren't for the people around me. I don't mean just my family. I mean for the ones that work with me day in and day out, the ones we spend most of our time with. The last message I want to throw out there to all the attorneys: don't settle for those low numbers. Let the defense counsel know what you're about. You're not going to shy down to the fight. Hold your ground, because there's money to be made out there. And I look forward to it every single time I walk into the courtroom.
That was trial lawyer Cynthia Attard. Thanks for sharing those stories. To learn more about Cynthia and her firm, Ecolov & Associates, visit their website, eiesq.com. All right, I'm Chad Sands. Thanks for listening. See you next time.
You've been listening to Celebrating Justice, presented by CloudLex and the Trial Lawyers Journal. Remember, the stories don't end here. Visit triallawyersjournal.com to become part of our community and keep the conversation going. And for a deeper dive into the tools that empower personal injury law firms, visit cloudlex.com/TLJ to learn more.